Morning, everybody. Welcome to another show. This is part three of our conversation about Michael's conversation with JRobin on Clubhouse. So we're getting into this. Hopefully, we're going to make a little bit better distance on this one, get a little further into things than we did last time.
We need to make a real. It's funny because there's never. Is my audio okay? Let's check that.
Yeah. Yep. Sounds fine. Yep.
There's never. Yeah, I mean, the commentary can just go on and on and on because we have all these ideas. But we're about to get into, if memory serves, we're about to get into the part where basically the personal attacks are going to start coming. My complete inability to focus, my complete lack of understanding. Pat on the head. There. It's okay, you silly non-believer. So, yeah, I think your level of frustration will start to amp up quicker as we get through this part.
All right, I'll try to make the snippets of video a little longer than what we usually do. I'll take some notes and hold my thoughts until I've got 2 or 3. All right, folks. For everybody that's joining in the chat, thank you for showing up on what is, for me at least, kind of early in the morning, at least for a Saturday. So for those of you shaking off hangover, a little partied up from the night before, or for those of you who are getting into your evening and are getting ready to get partied up, thanks for joining live. So yeah, we're going to get started here. I don't know that intros are really all that necessary at this point. If if you haven't seen intros, go back and watch part 1 and part 2, because we're nearly done with this segment of the conversation that Michael was nice enough to share with us. And so, yeah, we're just going to get back into it. And as usual, if there's any problems with audio playback from me or from Michael, sound issues, video issues, give a holler in the live chat. And any questions for Michael or me, just tag me in there and just specify if you're asking me, if you're asking Michael. But
yeah, because I never look at the live chat because I'm like a deer in the headlights. I won't hear or see anything else if that's scrolling through. So
yeah, so just let me know. Just tag at Jefferson, and let me know if it's a question for Michael. But yeah, here we go. So we are about an hour and 12 minutes into this, and I'm just going to hit play and see where we're at. I have not refreshed this from last time. It's exactly where we stopped, more or less. So let's see.
Again, the professionalism is just, I'm not worthy.
If it weren't for things like memory and this stuff being auto-saved, this would require a lot more work. So let's pull that screen up and let's see. Let's hope this volume is there. The volume's okay and the audio's going through.
Published that yet?
I'm saying, listen. Did you understand what I said when I said that?
Yeah, I did.
For begging. Okay, good. So where is the conclusion of the argument? It's a rough argument. Okay, I could revise it, but just for the sake of, I just like threw this together just now. But where was the conclusion in the premises of the argument I just gave to you? Because that would be what has to be the case. Where is the conclusion in the premises of the argument? Because that's what begs the question.
Say the argument again, and I'll say stop when you do it.
Let's say God reveals certain things to be the case.
Stop.
Yeah.
God reveals.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying God reveals. God can only reveal something if he exists. Yes.
Yeah, but that's not the issue, because the argument.
Yes, it is to me.
Listen, I'm gonna explain.
That's a big issue.
Listen. This is I'm gonna give you the conclusion of the argument, and I'm gonna give the argument. Then I want you to look very carefully for where the conclusion of the argument is in the premise. I'm gonna make this very clear for you. This is the conclusion of the argument. Okay, the conclusion is that I know certain things to be the case, and if you're gonna take knowledge to be some sort of a justified belief, then that's right. I just say I know something to be the case, right? Okay, good. Now I want you to look for that conclusion in the 2 premises I'm about to give you. Okay. First premise: God engages in revelation, where he does not lie, about his revelation. That's the first premise. Okay. Is a conclusion anywhere in that premise that I can know things to be the case? Go ahead, Michael. Okay, I'll give the second. I'm going to give the second premise. You're muted, by the way. I don't know why. The second premise is that I'm on the.
Sorry, I didn't know that I was muted.
Okay, the second premise is that I'm on the receiving end of God's revelation. Therefore, the conclusion again, I know certain things to be the case, because there's a justification.
Jefferson, pause for just 1 second.
That God reveals certain things, and
I think we should just a little bit of clarification. So just for everybody who hasn't either watched part 1 or part 2 right now, this is JRobin demonstrating that he doesn't understand what begging the question is. So he's trying to, what he's doing here is he's trying to lay out the argument and say, which of the conclusions are in the premises, but he doesn't understand that when he said, well, listen, because God exists, he doesn't understand that in and of itself is begging the question, because he's assuming facts not yet in evidence, and in an effort to be conciliatory. And I received a lot of messages actually about this afterwards, that I should have just continued to hammer down on this point, that he wasn't getting it, that he didn't understand. But I wanted, in an effort to move the conversation forward, I conceded. I'm like, okay, fine, you're just making an assumption, because he made it super clear here that he was the one, actually, ironically, that didn't have the understanding.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of weird that he doesn't seem to, because it's this weird kind of, I mean, what's he basically doing here? It's sort of the, there is a God, and my proof that there's a God is that I know that there's a God because he told me that he's God. Is that fair? Maybe that's a little too.
Oh no, no,
too tight a loop.
He doesn't say that. He doesn't say it in the words you just used, but that is, I mean, as soon as you say, well, because God reveals, like that already, like, you are, and this is the same conversation I had once with Matt Slick on Apologetics Live a couple of years ago. Everybody's heard his argument. God is a necessary precondition for intelligibility, right? Everybody's heard him say that a million times. And he said, well, I was speaking with him on that show, and he said, well, because God is a necessary precondition. I'm like, Matt, stop. I'm like, can you put this argument forward to me without begging the question? And he was silent for about 5 seconds. And he just said, no. And I said, well, thank you for at least admitting that. He hasn't spoken to me since then.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I think is interesting is that for some strange reason, JRobin is trying to maneuver this around, like, no, the conclusion is that I know stuff, not the conclusion that there is a God. It's like you've smuggled in a conclusion, but up to this, prior to this point, right, a lot of this is like, how do you have a rational justification for your belief in the existence of a God? And his is that you can even posit the idea of a God, right? That's usually what a lot of preceptors will do.
Yeah.
And so, like, no, where is that buried in the premises? Like, look, you're not even really presenting a syllogism at this point. So if you want to get into the whole premise conclusion, then point these things out and evaluate the inference rule, great, go ahead and do that. But generally what he's doing is like trying to dodge this and say, well, no, I'm saying that I can conclude that I know things because this God exists. Neat. You haven't proven that God exists. And before that argument is part of your idea of saying, well, the reason how is it that we know things? God reveals himself to us. God reveals things to us, so we have knowledge. So we know things because there's a God, and one of the things that we can know is a God, and it's inescapable that we know that that's a God because he reveals everything that we know because he's God.
Yeah. It's just, and their inability to see them. I don't know whether, and it's I'm careful not to just label that as dishonesty. So I don't know whether it's just the inability to see or the unwillingness to see. I'm not sure which one it is. Well, I think there are some people who are such bad faith actors that it is dishonest. But yeah, I don't want to just immediately label it as dishonest.
Yeah, and you're right, because and I don't know either. Especially in JRobin's case. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. Like, he's usually consistently incorrect about most of these points. So I don't know. I haven't seen him get so inconsistent that, and somebody could probably prove me wrong. I mean, he's been around long enough. I'm sure he said things that, well, and even then they could sound like they were inconsistent, but if you still have to kind of take into account, maybe he doesn't fully understand some of the entailments of the things that he's saying. He will.
Yeah, maybe. And I'm about the furthest thing from a philosopher that there is. I know the basics. Like, layman is a fair label for me when it comes to philosophy. I know a few things, and that's about it. So, if there's someone who's super savvy in philosophy, you could probably get me tripping over myself without a lot of effort. But in this case, I would say like, no, this actually is the thing, right? And but I again, as we go forward, you'll see that I have to concede the point just to keep things moving.
Yeah. And AJ pipes in here. JRobin doesn't deserve the charity. He's being dishonest. I'm inclined to suspect that, given the way he's talked, and I know that he. But then again, yeah, I don't know. You know, I would like to assume that it's dishonesty, because I've had conversations where I have said something and then he has taken it and immediately twisted it into the opposite of what I've said, or something completely tangential to what I've said. And I don't know if that's because he's dishonest just by nature or by practice, or because he's not very bright and he's not paying attention. He's so busy trying to find a way to trip somebody else up. He's not really paying attention. He's not really thinking anything through. At this point, it's like he's either predictably rational in that anything you give him can get turned into something completely different than what you intended, or he's just lying all the time.
Yeah, it's the Canadian. I think maybe you just have to chalk it up to the Canadian in me. I'm too nice.
Yes, Jim's like, I think it's okay to assume that JRobin is a bad faith actor. Yeah, and given the way that he's talked, like some of the standards he's held for people, I definitely disagree with the way he treats people there, because and you see this like in your case, I laid this out in another video. There's always that kind of macro thing, and in your case, I think he actually violates it. I remember mentioning that before, because normally what he starts doing when he's having a discussion with a skeptic, he starts off getting frustrated by referring to atheists as a whole as, you guys are crap, you guys don't think, you guys evade. You know, it starts off as the big group, and then as the more frustrated it gets, the more targeted it becomes. So it's no longer, this is what atheists do. It's, this is what you do. You're a liar. You're dodging. You're not focusing. You're unintelligent, you know. So he has a way of starting off grand, you know, kind of generalizing, and then kind of like it's more passive aggressive. And then the less patience he has with you, the more willing he is to get in deep. But I think that's when he starts looking for things. He wants you to crack and say something mean to him, because that's what he's done that many times, where if somebody comes back with a little sassiness and tells him to stop being a bitch, or stop whining, or, you know, stop trolling, or something.
That's right. I saw that in a video a while ago, and you're 1,000% right, because as soon as that happened, he said, now I see your true colors coming through.
Yeah, and that's like one of many times that I've seen him do that. And anytime he gets that, he thinks he's like a dog with a bone. He just runs with that.
Yeah.
And then
what we need is a mirror, right, to hold it up and say, you know, we could use a mirror, but these guys, this is a broader question. And then I promised people we're going to get more to the video, because we're already doing, we said we weren't going to do. But what is it? What is it you think? Or like, I'd be curious to hear this comments or things from the audience. Start a poll. Why is it that none of these apologists will show their face?
Yeah.
I get it for different reasons why. I mean, Jefferson's done it before. There are videos of him as himself. I'm just me, you know. Hey, even though, I mean, I'm the one with a face for radio, guys, but I still put myself out there because I like feeling like there's just some kind of personal connection, right? But all of these guys, you know, whether it be Double D, JRobin, Matt, and none of these guys will show their face, and I find that super interesting. I really do. Oh, are we frozen?
No, I think we're okay. Although I was trying to make sense of a comment here on the side, but yeah, I agree with you. All right, let's jump back into this. So yeah, where we left off, he's attempting to show how he's not in fact begging the question, but every time he's trying to say, no, that's not what I'm doing, he usually gives an example that indicates that's precisely what he's doing. So we're going to keep going with that.
I know that God reveals them. Okay, so is a conclusion in any way in either of those two premises that would therefore render me a question begging?
Not in that syllogism, no.
Or render me as a question. Good. So then I'm not question begging.
So can you please explain to me? Sorry, fuck. Sorry, I apologize. Just give me 1 second, please. So I just had somebody come in my office.
Yeah, Michael just said I was question begging. I don't think he understood what I was saying, and then secondly, I don't think he understood what he was saying, because the point I was making was that I could know certain things. It wasn't the case that God exists, which Michael seems to be. I don't know, that's what he seems to be under the impression that was happening when it wasn't. I said I could know certain things to be the case. And that argument, I'm not question begging at all. So yeah, I don't think he was focusing.
Sorry, apologies. I said to shoo somebody away. So okay. So when you're begging the question, you are assuming the truth of the conclusion.
Yeah, the conclusion is embedded in one of the premises.
No, that's not what it is. So begging the question, if I'm not mistaken, is an informal fallacy.
Right.
I haven't looked this up in a long time. But it's something like assuming the truth of a conclusion. So when you say in your first premise, God does X, right? So God does X, one thing, and then in the second, and then when you get to the conclusion, and that's how I understand, because you're assuming that you have to assume that the God exists in order to get to your conclusion, Robin.
Michael,
you cannot get to your conclusion.
Michael, what is the conclusion of the argument I just gave to you?
That you can know certain things because it's revealed by God.
Right. Okay, good. And begging the question is when the conclusion is embedded in one of the premises, right?
Right. So I just looked it up
good.
Here. It says
so
in classical rhetoric and logic, begging the question or assuming the conclusion is an informal fallacy that occurs when an argument's premises assume the truth of the conclusion instead of supporting it. So you have to assume.
So where is the conclusion? Okay, so where is the conclusion that I know things in any of those two premises?
You said because God reveals.
Yeah,
that what does it have to do with me knowing things though?
But
I think this is kind of odd. This is dishonest from JRobin, right? Because he understands, and people have pointed this out to him. He usually starts off with the whole God is ultimate and it's a mind, so what's your problem with that? He doesn't usually phrase it that cleanly, but that's what he usually starts with.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more you talk to him, all of a sudden the goals start shifting over, where you start hearing the other necessary things like, oh, well, it's also personal, and that's why it has to be a mind, and it's also revelational because that's how we know things. So when he's trying to say that his epistemology is based on this, right? Like I frequently wonder about possibly his sanity or his ability to understand the real entailment of what's going on here, because if you're going to if the reason that this is begging the question is because he's defined that as necessary. So his epistemology is necessary. It couldn't be any other way. That's how epistemology works. It comes from God according to him. And so, like, well, how is that begging the question? It's like, because your knowledge is coming from a being you assume to know exists because it revealed itself, so you can assume to know it exists. Not only is the existence of the God circular, but your claims about however you're saying you ground, quote unquote, ground epistemology, that's also begging the question. I know how I can know things because that thing knows things and lets me know things. Well, how do you know that thing's real? Because it lets me know things. It told me it, like.
Yeah.
I mean,
some of the apologists that came long before, people like JRobin and his friends would say things like, you either have to know, in order for you to make statements, and these are things that have been said to me directly, in order to make the statements that you are making, you either have to know everything or you have to know someone who knows everything. They can make the statements because they assume they know everything because they have a friend who knows everything, and it's God who's revealed that he knows everything. And I'm like, and that is so dizzying, but it somehow makes sense to them.
Yeah. I will make a comment to today's one. They were just talking to Robin about his rampant transphobia for like an hour yesterday. This isn't calculus. Yeah, the problem with Christian transphobia specifically is that they believe they're justified in it because they're the victims of transsexuals. Transsexuals are deluded in their sin nature and are running around lying to everyone and victimizing them with their their adherents that everyone join them in their lie. That's really what most Christians think when they get on this thing. I know that's what JRobin thinks. So the reason that he has to misgender people is because he cannot, in quote unquote in good conscience, per his faith in the Lord, perpetuate and participate in this lie that he believes these people are unjustly and unrighteously inflicting upon the rest of the population around them. They have to stand up for truth and righteousness. They are paragons of virtue. Like, it's self-righteous. It's completely up its own ass in its justifications, but that's how they justify it. So the problem with this is that it's easy to say, and it's very easy to say that JRobin's wrong. I think he's wrong. In fact, I know he's wrong. That's just wrong. But the thing is, like, is he transphobic and then using his Christianity to justify his ignorance and bigotry, or has some of that Christianity fed into that, and does he actually believe that that's the case? He's been told that enough times in his belief system that that's okay. It's with a lot of people coming up.
That's very much column A and column B. I think it's both.
Yeah.
Because it's he does he and his friends, the most common target, someone who unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because she continues to make herself available to be misgendered, and I'm speaking of Brenda. And anyone in the community will know who I'm speaking of. When you go into Clubhouse and you see, Brenda will come into and she makes really good arguments and stuff like that, and they insist on calling her Brendan, misgendering her continuously, and I think it's column A and column B. It reminds me in some ways of that absolute shit human Jordan Peterson, right? Who I'm ashamed to say is a fellow Canadian. Right, he got in a lot of trouble at his university because he looked at it as some type of personal slight that he had to identify people or use their pronouns as they identified. Like it's any sweat off his balls to say she versus he or they versus he or she. It's ridiculous. It's disgusting, and so I think it is. I think it is both. I think it is.
Yeah.
I think that they are transphobic, but a big reason they are partially transphobic is because of their stupid book.
Yeah, that particular aspect of that side of the faith tradition allows them to kind of justify. And in some cases, I've seen people who were probably ignorant of LGBTQ issues or trans, anything like that, right? And they certainly never gone anywhere near even really looking into trans issues, right? Yeah. But depending on the church they started going to, they've got a pastor that's really outspoken against it and gets very political about it. And now all of a sudden they're like, you know what? My pastor has told me things about this community and how devious they are and deceptive. And then all of a sudden it's like you took a person who basically knew nothing and weaponized them and turned them into a bigot, right? So you can get somebody now, and it doesn't excuse their bigotry because they don't usually. It's not like they listen to the claim and then go out and like, my pastor is demonizing this entire group of people. Maybe I should go verify this and check in on this. Maybe he's reaching some weird conclusions here. If they just accept it and then decide they're going to internalize that, and that's going to inform their approach going forward. Yeah, they're bigots. They didn't do their homework.
Yeah. Or if they go online and see shitbag humans like Steven Anderson, right? Or what's his name? Greg Locke, who just have hate just coming out of their pores. That can help in their indoctrination as well. And they're just brainwashing them into seeing this other segment of the population as dirty, sinful, reprobate people. Like, fuck, man. Like, if any of these people actually did get into positions of power, the amount of real harm they could do to real people, and I mean like killing people, right? Because that's what it would do. Because that's what the Bible calls for. Let's not shit ourselves, people. It's really scary. It's really scary.
Yeah, and we have a lot of people that are kind of comfy with that, cozying up to that kind of stuff at state levels in this country. I mean, take a look at Texas. I mean, it's
oh fuck, yeah.
Texas or Florida. At the national level, less so. But at the state level, across a lot of states, Republican Party's done a pretty good job of gerrymandering a lot of states. And so, despite representation for voting, and even if you have to have usually overwhelming blowout, votes coming in for a Democratic opponent in a lot of states. My home state was like that. If it wasn't overwhelmingly for the Democratic candidate, a Republican could just kind of slide in. They were never really. It was never very representative, which is why they ended up changing. They changed the system. They ended up creating a commission kind of thing to read that was in charge of drawing those district lines, because every time a political party came in and Democrats have done it as well. Democrats have gerrymandered the shit out of the state of Massachusetts. So yeah, it's been an issue in this country for a long time. But that kind of local control, we're seeing that, and you're seeing more and more people. Jeff Durbin has been posting videos where he and some of his buddies have been going to the Colorado state legislature, because Colorado is trying to pass a law similar to what Texas passed in terms of kind of allowing people to sue people who provide, abortion services or whatever.
Yeah.
I think Colorado's is almost identical, and these guys are showing up and basically backing it, and it's like. They're Christians in the community, and it's like, okay, so you're backing a law that basically allows the government to pass a law that turns people into civil litigating terrorists against their fellow citizens. Like that's what you're hoping to do. You're hoping to it'll have a chilling effect on people providing abortion services if they know they can be sued by some random person, not even somebody within the state, somebody from outside the state. You could go down to Texas and sue somebody, I think.
Yeah, it's so completely ridiculous. It snowed here last night. I'm just east of Toronto. It snowed here last night about 3-4 centimeters. But it's when I hear shit like this that, as soon as I'm done with this recording, I'm going to run out, lay down on the street, even though there's snow all over it, and roll around and kiss the ground that I live in fucking Canada.
Yeah.
But okay, how do you know things?
I gave the argument already.
Right, and you don't want to restate it right now. You said
I restated it.
things.
I've restated it like 3 times, so it's not an issue of me being afraid to restate anything. Okay, I'll restate it again now for you again. It seems like you don't have the ability to focus on the issue, because
it
seems like you have something that you want me to say something that I'm not saying. And you just have this like third conversation, or this like second conversation going on in your mind. You're not really focusing on what's actually happening here. You think I'm saying things that I'm not actually saying, right? Because you're not focusing. Your question that you asked me was, what is the final authority in my worldview? And I said that God is, with respect to both epistemology and ontology. Ontologically, God is the metaphysical starting point. Okay, that's and so in the sense of final authority, on that sense, ontologically, yes, that would be God. In the epistemological sense, we're appealing to God's revelation. When you're talking about epistemology, you're talking about your knowledge statements, your mental knowledge, right? Okay, good. So if that's the case, right, the conclusion of whatever argument I would give, and I really wouldn't need to give an argument, it's just a conclusion, because you just asked me my opinion, is simply the case that my knowledge is derivative of God's revelation. Okay, so
which is derivative of his existence. I don't understand how he's missing this key point. It's like he has inextricably linked God's existence with his ability to know things, with this, like, to the point where these guys actually are still entertaining this notion, well, if there wasn't a God, then nothing would be intelligible. Like, ding dong, the entailment, if your worldview is true, is that if there wasn't a God, there would be an absence of everything.
Yeah.
Nothing would be here, not just your ability to understand stuff.
Yeah, one of the best questions I ever heard, and when I get into the heat of some of these discussions, my passion takes over, and I forget to ask this question. I need to make myself remember it at least one time, and that is, and I don't remember who it was that said this, but it may have been someone like Lawrence Krauss who was talking with someone about design. I think that's what it was, and he said, can you please tell me what a place, what a universe, what a world that wasn't designed would look like. If we have this world and it is because it was all designed to be this way, what would it be like if it wasn't designed? right? Because everything is like in Robin's mind, everything is as the way it is because it was designed to be that way.
Right.
You know, but how would it be different if there was no God, you know, and you know, how my worldview is unintelligible because I don't accept the reality of God. Where are the differences? Show me the differences. I need to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always probably work. But I mean, when you get into these kinds of conversations, you usually have got, you know, your mind could be tracking on something else. So
Yeah. Or I mean, in truth, right? You know, with respect to what Robin said, it's really just my inability to focus.
oh, right, of course, yeah, and that's because, and that's not a slight on you being someone from another country. That's because you're an atheist and you can't account for your reason and logic.
Yeah. I'm delusional. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
clearly. I mean,
Clearly.
you have to start with the assumption that his God is real.
Right.
If I were to give an argument for that, okay, which you're saying I'm doing a question begging fallacy. If I'm going to give an argument, I would say something like God engages in revelation. God's revelation is always true, and then I'm on the receiving end of God's revelation. Therefore, I know things to be the case. Now, so that was actually 3 premises. I kind of broke up the first premise into 2 like smaller premises, but bottom line is, yeah, where is the conclusion, and then that I know things in those premises that would render the argument question begging.
So again, we're at this point we're talking. We seem to be doing this a lot. We're talking past each other. So
did you not say that argument was question begging?
Right, and then I read out what it was. Right, so I'll read it again. When an argument's premises assume the truth of the conclusion, and the last conclusion you gave is that you can know things because of God's revelation.
Okay, does saying that God reveals things imply that I know things?
I think this is odd, right? Because he doesn't understand that when he's making that argument, and he hasn't pushed back on that, right? He can know things because God's revealed them. It begs the question that the God exists, and he keeps wanting to shift it to, well, how is it begging the question when my conclusion is I know things? Like, okay, if you're trying to reach a conclusion that, hey, why is it that I can know things at all to any degree of certainty or probabilistic reliability? Well, I bet it's because of God. And how do I know that? Because God. Well, wait, how do I know that a God really exists? Because he reveals things to me. That's how I know things. Oh, that's right. Okay, so it all comes full circle. It's like that's the begging the question part. Like it's begging the question because you're assuming the conclusion that there's a God to reveal things to you, and that's how you have knowledge. And he's not getting that. He's just like, well, my conclusion is that I can know things. So how is that begging the question when I start with God reveals things to me? Because you haven't established the God existing yet.
Yeah.
Dingus.
And what no, it's true. And what I'm about to do is everyone who's watching this right now, and I've seen a couple of comments that you've highlighted popped up, is I'm about to piss you all off because I'm about to just concede to, like, in the interest of moving the conversation forward, I'm going to concede the point, and I'm just going to say, well, you're just sorry. Maybe it was just an assumption, which is the same fucking thing. However, it's not within his bag of toys. It's not the same thing. And I'm sure he views that as a personal victory that I was able to back down. And it's just another way that he's shown how I'm wrong, right? How I can't focus. But I really want to move past this. And so everybody's about to get really pissed off when you hear me concede the point and say, okay, maybe you're just assuming I'm wrong. You know, sorry, I was wrong. Maybe you're just assuming. Let's move past this. Please don't too much in the comments.
You can pour your hate out to them, and don't try not to do that in the live chat because you might bum me out. Do it in the comments after this posts. I will say I kind of agree with that because the point is, because it is kind of the same thing. The point of illustrating to him, if you have the opportunity when you're talking to him, to say, hey, you're begging the question, is to say, like, you are making an assertion and it has this you have this, because the way you're trying to assert this is a question begging fallacy. That's supposed to be instructive to get them to kind of clue in on it. If it's not instructive, like if they just refuse to look at it, they're not going to acknowledge it. Like, no, I don't see how it is. And it doesn't matter how you explain the mechanics of how that fallacy works. They're just not going to admit that that's what they're doing. it's funny because if your idea of conceding is just like, okay, well, all you're doing is asserting it, but you're not really demonstrating it, then what he's going to do, like, okay, that gets him back to that point. But he's like, well, I already laid out an argument that works. So why aren't you rationally accepting my argument? Like, okay, now we get right back to the point where, because your argument contains a fallacy.
Yeah.
You're asking me to believe a claim, an argument about something that you're claiming to be real on bad evidence. That's not rational.
Yeah. I once heard an apologist like say, and I've heard, and I don't think I'm the one guilty of bringing this back up, but I had a conversation years ago with Tim Bruggencate, and he said that he said are all forms of circularity bad? And I said no. Like, for example, like I have to use my reason. Like, I have to use my reason to justify my reason. I accept that there's circularity in that. And he said, well, the difference is, and he put together this argument. He said, this is the difference between vicious circularity and virtuous circularity.
Mm-hmm.
So because he's talking about God, it is virtuously circular. And I've heard members of this sycophant band now say the same thing. I don't know whether they went back, and I don't know whether Cy took it from someone else and he just puppeted it out to me. I don't know whether Cy, is, from an apologetic perspective, he's pretty clever. So I don't know whether it was originally his or whether he got it from somebody else, but it has now kind of come back into conversations that I'm seeing. Virtuous, this idea of, because it's rooted in God, virtuously, like puff your chest out, virtuously circular. And that's okay somehow.
Yeah, and it would be better if they just, instead of trying to make this, well, it's virtuously circular, like don't do that, right? And the only way they can really do that is because they don't understand philosophy enough to say something, or they don't want to commit themselves to something really dumb, right? Like, oh no, it's not question begging. It's more like, we assume God in the same way you would assume A equals A. So God, the existence of God is like tautological.
Yeah.
Like, okay, how does that work? Because A equaling A, that law of identity, something is what it is and can't be what it's not, neither exists or it doesn't. Those three things, you kind of assume them from the jump, and then assuming God is one, just assuming God from the jump. If you're saying, oh, it's an extant being, it meets those logical things, because they used to say this. Well, you have to presuppose God in order for, before logic. Like God,
oh yeah,
like logic presupposes the existence of a God. It's like, but if that God exists in a way that's consistent with logic, then logic presupposes your God.
Yeah, and that's and therein goes the circle again, right? And again, Cy was the first person I ever heard say, I watched him in a debate online. You can probably still find it online. Ten Bruggencate and a guy named Dustin Seegers, who came on the podcast a while ago, and he's kind of a dirtbag. They were debating, these two guys, on a college campus. And at one point during the conversation, Cy says, if you don't start with the Christian God of the Bible, you can't make sense of anything.
Yeah. Yep. Common for Cy.
And, and that's quite a statement, right? Like, it doesn't matter anything. My own existence, my phone, the internet we're using. If you assume God, fucking cool, man, then everything makes sense. But if you don't start there, you got nothing.
Yep. Yeah. And Cy's. I mean, at least Cy was like outright with that assertion. It made him a huge target. Everybody wanted to like.
He had the balls to always stick up, unlike Double D, for the Christian God. Like, he would always say that, the Christian God, and he had the courage of his convictions in a way that, like, earlier on, like when I was during this conversation speaking with Robin, how he wouldn't affirm the Christian God, how Double D won't affirm the Christian God until he's fucking pegged into something. There's Clubhouse conversations of me in the Ask a Christian room where I ask him, like, which God are we talking about? And in a Christian room surrounded by Christians, he would not affirm the Christian God. And that was one way that Cy, I still have more respect for him, because he would at least have the courage of his convictions instead of being a fucking coward about it.
And he actually showed up. I mean, he showed up on camera, and he places. He physically showed up and did stuff.
He came to like for the podcast episode. So we were going to Cy and I were going to have a debate on modern day debate, and I was going back and forth between he, James, and myself. And finally, he backed out of the conversation, and he sent me an email, and he said I go online all the time. So he's around London, Ontario. So if Toronto's in the middle, London is here, and I'm in Whitby. I don't care if people know where I am, and I'm on the other side. Toronto's kind of in the middle. And he said, "Look, you're only a couple hours away. If we're going to do this, either you're coming to me or I'm coming to you." I gave him my address. He showed up at my house. He sat 3 feet from where I am right now, and we had the conversation. So yeah, he did show up. He had the ball. He's since disappeared. Like there's a bunch of controversy surrounding. Apparently, he did some stuff that was not cool to someone, and he's disappeared. He has ostracized himself from the community. But yeah, he did have the balls. He showed up. Way more respect.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd heard a couple of different things. Some people were saying, "Oh no, it's side 10." Turns out he's just as monstrous as people thought. And I had heard from somebody else like, "No, actually, what happened was that he was married. He was having problems in his marriage. He ended up getting close to somebody at the church. He had an affair with her.
Yeah.
And then somebody told or somebody found out, and then he was removed. He wasn't removed from the church, but he was removed from all his offices and stuff because they had him in some kind of like outreach thing or whatever, teaching Sunday school on the board. They just so like you can continue to attend, but you can't really do anything official in the church.
Yeah.
And I think he just left that congregation. So yeah, I've heard lots of different things, and it's like I really don't care. I just know that it seems like with a personality like Size, I kind of knew that going into it. I'm like, this guy is going to get alienated from at least one congregation before he's done.
Yeah.
That's just sort of the trend that a lot of this stuff follows. So.
Yeah.
No, but you have to
Okay, good.
assume.
That was the first premise. Okay, good. So no. The answer is no.
You're trying to railroad. You're trying to railroad.
Does the second premise that I'm on the receiving end of God's revelation? Well, I mean, after assuming the first premise and the second premise, it would just follow. But does the second
on what
premise,
grounds should you assume the first premise?
That's irrelevant because it's not an issue of the
not
soundness
to me,
of the
it's
argument.
not.
No, because it's not an issue of the soundness.
God exists.
Listen. You're questioning the validity of the argument, not the soundness. So you're equivocating now.
Oh no, that's not.
You're questioning. Okay, all right, JRobin. I'm gonna rewind that a little bit so everybody can hear that again. That's a weird fucking thing to say.
Not to me, it's not.
That's irrelevant because it's not an issue of the soundness of the argument.
Not.
No, because it's not an issue of the soundness.
God exists.
Listen. You're questioning the validity of the argument, not the soundness. So you're equivocating now.
You can't have soundness without the validity. I love it that these guys seem to think that they can do this. Yeah. Darth Dawkins had a really hard time with this as well. It's like, oh, whatever. I don't have to worry. Like, yeah, you can't have soundness without validity, because validity, adhering to the inference rule, those inference rules are truth preserving for a reason. So if you're going to talk about validity and soundness for your arguments, then you better know what you're talking about. Don't bring these terms up when you don't understand what you're saying. Like, basically, I think what he's trying to say is, well, all the premises are, even if the argument isn't like following for you, everything that I'm saying is true.
Yeah.
Like,
which is what I said. Like, you're assuming God exists. Like, that's not a problem. What? Like, yeah, and that's what I'm like, it is for me, right? It's like, just if you are going to go so far as to just, it's like you are, and this is at one point, like, and I say it later on where it's like, it's like, if you're going to start with your conclusion, cool. Just understand that you've started, like, so I had a conversation with CJ Cox last week about this. I'm like, like, if the answer is 2, and I'm like, and you start to have a conversation, no, the answer is 2. You have to understand just how, like, if you're starting with your answer already, I don't understand how people can't see how dishonest that is.
Right.
You're not interested. You're not interested in dialogue if you have started with your answer.
And that's one of the things that they tend to forget, because in a lot of cases these guys are kind of coming at this from sort of a hyper rationalist stance, where they just say, no, it has to be two, because you have to assume that in order for reason to be a thing, in order for us to be able to use that, it has to be imposed on us by some ultimate mind.
That's
Right?
right.
It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's fine, but then somebody, if they make a claim like that, well, I can stipulate the facts. I can assert a fact like two, like, okay, how did you get there? You would either demonstrate it empirically. If by two you mean two trees, you can show that there are two trees outside your window. So that's an empirical justification for that fact. Or you can show it through rationalization, right? Or through reason, or through something like math. You can demonstrate a process how you got to two.
Mhm.
But with this other kind of stuff, like, well, ultimate facts, right? It has to come from something else, and it's like, okay, but how epistemologically, how do you know that? You can't demonstrate that. You're just asserting that everything comes from God.
Yeah.
And then looking around at other people, like, I don't understand why you dum-dums haven't concluded this. Like, because it's not a conclusion. You
Yeah.
asked yourself the question,
Exactly.
why is there something rather than nothing, and inferred a God from the something you think is real.
Yeah. And the problem is that when you do that, and when you push them on that, then they follow up with a question. Then they follow up with a question like, how, prove everything wasn't created five seconds ago.
Right.
And because I can't prove everything wasn't demonstrated 5 seconds ago, he's right.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah. Well, you can't defeat hard solipsism. So I'm right, you're wrong. It's like, yeah, but you still made a claim. And the weird thing about that is that you could. I've seen people try to do this. I don't know how successful it is, but to try to say, okay, well, you've got this individual with this mind. It's ultimate. Blah blah blah. Well, how do I know? Okay, let's say that that's true. Everything, all of reality is dependent on this mind. How do I know that I'm not just a figment of this thing's imagination? We're calling it a mind. Like, oh no, that's not how his mind works. And then they start changing the definition of mind in real time while they're talking with you, so it's no longer recognizable. So it's like, okay, if you were just saying it's a mind analogically, the analogy is breaking down. If you were trying to say that it's a mind for the purposes of saying that it has a personality, it has a will, it can relate to us, well, all of that stuff is breaking down, because it's like, and this goes back to the claim that I usually make. Darth and JRobin and many others, Praise, Jill, Redefined Living, all want to kind of make these claims where God is all the good stuff about the analogy that I'm presenting, and none of the other entailments apply. None of the ones that make things difficult or become contradictory. You can just ignore those. And when somebody brings them up, they get frustrated. Like, I don't even know why you're fixating on that. Like, you said it was a mind. If I'm comparing it to that doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, well, I mean analogically. Like, we can't ultimately know what God really is. Like, okay, so then somebody could just come along and say the reason that we know things is because of the great mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Big G, big M, the great mystery. You don't even have to call it God. It's just the unanswered question. And is it a mind or is it not? Don't know. It could be a mind, but it's definitely not just one. That's no different than what they're doing with God.
Yeah, and somehow and it's funny because it is wholly unsatisfying, right? And I get this. It's not particularly satisfying to me, but sometimes and I say this all the time, but sometimes the most honest thing we can say is, I don't know, right? So why is there something rather than nothing? How do we get here? We don't yet know how chemistry became biology. The whole abiogenesis thing. I don't know. And that's not satisfying. I would like to know, but it doesn't make it okay that they simply profess, well, in fact, you know what? I do know, and it's this thing called God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's a super cool assertion, bro. But until you can back it up, like Hitch said, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Yeah, and getting into that whole thing. Well, I answered the big question with it must be God, and since I've asserted that it must be God, then you have to assert, you have to acknowledge that it must be the case that God exists. Otherwise, none of this other stuff follows, right? Because I'm telling you that logic and reason and human our subjective experiences and the passing of time and the reality of space and physics and all this stuff is dependent upon this being. It has to be the case. And if you don't accept it, well, the entailment is you can't make sense of all these things that are going on around you. Like, no, idiot.
Yeah.
The entailment to that is that none of those things exist.
Yeah. And the fact that I have attached uniformity of nature and all these other things. I have attached them to this God. Because I've attached them to this God who has the capacity to make all these things real and true and happen and all that other stuff, because that closes the circle, right? I have now explained it, right? If you're saying that's not the case, now you have to show me how it can't be. You have to show me why it isn't. And you also have to come up with something else that is just as good an explanation as my made up thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I like this comment here from AJ. Analogies only work when you can identify the way in which two different things are alike. They don't know enough about God to even speak about it analogically. Yeah, and the odd thing about that, I agree with you there, AJ. The weird thing is that many of them have even said that.
Yeah.
It's like a condition, like, well, I'm just saying that it's a mind, because that's the closest that we can get. Like, really, why not just call it a mystery or call it a being?
Yeah.
Right. They don't want to call it a being because then that sounds like it might be a creature, and that's contingent. So it's a mind. Like,
Yep.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. And Aaron Ross says this in his book. He said, just a very quick one-liner, saying God did it doesn't explain how God did it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And for a lot of them, the issue that they have is not the issue that they contend with isn't how. They don't care about how things came to be. They care about why. The fact that, like, and that's one of the reasons why I think that they attack things like any of the abiogenesis hypotheses or the theory of evolution, is because those are looking at how does speciation occur, how might life have come to be on, at least on this planet and possibly other planets. That's just a mechanistic explanation. It doesn't get to the why.
Yeah.
Why is there life? And it's like, well, that is a different question. But
And
for whatever reason, because evolution fails to give them an answer to why, they think that it also fails to describe how.
Well, no, and it's funny, right? And for the, again, I've said this before, but I try to separate the science from the individual, right? And hot button topic right now, and has been for a while, Richard Dawkins, right? Who has done and said some shitball things, right? Not cool things. But his science is still his science, right? In the God Delusion, he says, just because you can put together, just because you can form words into a question, doesn't make it a valid question. Like, what is what? Yeah, I can say, why is and I can just make something up. That doesn't mean it's a valid question that deserves our time or energy to put in an answer to. Why are we here? We don't know. You're the one saying you do know. And when you make that assertion, it is now on you to back that shit up. I'm perfectly fine saying I don't know. Yeah.
Before we continue, Jody, we have a point. Analogy and metaphor are not the same thing. God as a mind is a metaphor, not an analogy. Yeah, and yet that's a great point. Yeah, when I'm bringing that up, that's Darth's language, right? Darth always he always presents it. Well, when I say that God is a mind, I'm speaking analogically. But Jody's absolutely right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's not no. The soundness
was upon the
soundness.
Listen.
The premises
Michael,
have to be
really,
true.
really begging the question
and
isn't about invalidity. Look. You're questioning the form of the argument I'm giving it to you. That I am begging the question. I'm importing the conclusion in the premises themselves. Okay.
That's in fact not what I said, Robin.
That's a different. No, that's what begging the question is. Okay. Now what you're doing is you're attacking the soundness of the argument, which is an entirely separate question. Okay. A begging the question fallacy is an informal fallacy, right? Okay. Right. It's a fallacy of reasoning.
Okay.
So it's not about the soundness of the argument.
Okay. But your argument is not sound.
But yeah, you can't get to a sound argument if you are. This is always just so goofy. I'm not going to belabor this, but he seems to have this real problem because he doesn't want to get pigeonholed into having committed a begging the question fallacy. And we haven't gotten to the point where I think you've asserted you're just going to be like, you know what? Okay, fine. You're just assuming it to be the case. But but yeah, he's not gonna let this go. He's never gonna admit to this, and I kind of see why, because
his house of cards blows away. If he admits to committing a fallacy in what he's done, his house of cards fucking blows away in the wind.
Exactly. And yeah, he can't acknowledge that. But the weird thing to me about what he's doing here with you is that he seems to want it both ways, where he's going to lean into the structure, how strong the structure is of what he's talking about, if he thinks it's going to give him an advantage against what you're saying. And then when he sees that that's not working for him, he leans away from that and just starts getting into some kind of, well, the premises consist, he doesn't say this, but well, since the premises consist of transcendental truths, basically this argument's going to work itself out anyway. Like, right? Yeah. Like that seems to be kind of what he's like that's underneath what everything that he's saying. So he's always doing this, like, I'm going to lean, like if he catches you in something formal that he can kind of get you on, he's not going to let it go. But when it comes to him and somebody's like, yeah, I don't, what you're laying out here in terms of how you can know things begs the question when it comes to the existence of God. And he's like, yeah, but it doesn't beg the question of how I know things. Like, actually, in a way it does, because you have to assume the God that exists in order to allow you to know things. And then he's still going to say, well, that's true. All you could do is say something about the validity, but you're not saying anything about the soundness. It's like, I don't even know why at that point, like, look, JRobin should just abandon talking about that validity and soundness, because he doesn't get it.
Stop saying words.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the issue though, because the original contention was that I was begging because the original contention was that I was begging the question.
Okay, then look,
hold on a minute.
In the interest of being charitable, I will say that then perhaps I said the wrong thing. Perhaps I should have said you've made an unfounded assumption.
Okay, yeah,
can that get us past this stumbling block?
Sure. Now, I don't even remember what the original point was. I just remember you asking me that question. I was making the case for you for why God exists, or how I know that God exists, or really just the impossibility of the contrary. And I was saying that God has certain properties.
How is it impossible God doesn't exist? I'm curious. I don't know that I've ever heard somebody say that.
I could go through all. Yeah, I can go through all of God's properties. So, God.
I do want to point out for anybody that is, because I've pointed this out before. I think a lot of what informs JRobin's stuff is his understandings, how a modal ontological argument has probably been explained to him from apologists and theologians, and that is the idea, like the reason that he says that a God is it's impossible for there to not be a God is because God, from that not very well formed modal ontological argument, that God is necessary. So he's just assuming, he assumes the necessity of God. Therefore, God, it's impossible for there not to be one. I tried to get into a discussion with him about that, about like God being necessary, God being impossible. Darth has tried this with others too, and it's not a good look, because I don't think they understand. Most of what I think they're getting is from Alvin Plantinga's argument, because right. he kind of was the one that championed that whole thing. But the way I've read these sort of like paraphrased descriptions of how the modal ontological works from Plantinga, and they don't get it right. They seem to miss out that, like, you can take the modalogical argument and start to kind of like lean into more of a, okay, I'm going to demonstrate how God is impossible. Right. The whole point of it is like he either necessarily exists or he's impossible. You can make an argument that God is impossible. These guys seem to think like, no, God is necessary, therefore it's impossible for him not to exist, and you can conclude that rationally. Like, no, there's arguments for it that are valid, but because these guys don't know the difference between validity and soundness, they think validity is soundness. If somebody's made an argument and it's evaluated to be valid, they assume that it's sound, therefore it is the truth, therefore you can make an argument that proves God.
Yeah. And this is where I kind of plant myself firmly, and I say, like the Christian God for sure. The Christian God for sure does not exist. So and that's why I was trying to get them to hammer down on which God they're talking about. Because as soon as someone says the Christian God, I'm like, yeah, that God for sure doesn't exist. And I try to get them away from Vague Town, USA, right? Where they like to try to, like, it's ultimate and a mind. Well, who fucking cares? Ultimate and a mind, right? They start to argue for this God they don't even believe exists.
Yeah. I appreciate that comment, Spooky. Thank you. I wish I'd lived in a van down by the river. That would have been such a cool origin story.
Mm.
Let's start with God being ultimate, okay? God is ultimate in the sense that he's a metaphysical foundation, okay? Now, reductio ad absurdum, if God were not, if there was no metaphysical foundation that existed, then there wouldn't be a basis for you to assert or establish truth in any sense of the statement, because metaphysics deals with the nature of truth. It deals with the nature of reality. If there is no nature to truth and how it's distinguished from that which is not, then you render the world completely and utterly meaningless and unintelligible, where everything that does occur, if you could even say that things do occur, would just be completely and utterly spontaneous without any rhyme or reason, right? So even things like your own brain states wouldn't have any connectivity or relation between each other. So you just completely lose the ability to have intelligibility in such a world. So do you accept that first property of God?
No.
You don't. Do you have a rebuttal?
So here's what's really interesting. So I get asked this question a lot, and so a lot of people say, well, if you don't have God, you don't have a grounding for these types of things and stuff like that. And again, because I answer honestly, people say, well, what's your grounding for why? I think one time I heard it posed to me was, what's your grounding for why anything is or could be? I could be butchering that. I don't. It was a long time ago that I heard that, so I apologize if I'm butchering it. And again, in the interest of honesty, I say, I don't know. Like, I don't need to, just because and you're only talking to me, if I can't tell you how something started, right? Like we can look back, like in physics, right? We can look back to whatever it is, millionths of a second, something after Planck time, right?
Michael,
we don't know what happened.
I don't think you understood the question. I don't think.
Oh no, I do.
It's not about how something started.
I'm just answering it in a different way.
No. I'm saying the question you just told me. It's not about how something started. It's about the nature of reality itself. The nature of things like truth. Okay. If you don't have an answer to the question,
the nature of reality and the nature of truth,
yeah, that's a metaphysical question. If you don't have an answer, so for example, if I tell you the apple's on the counter, right? That's a statement of truth. I'm saying it is true that the apple's on the counter, right? Now, if you ask me, Robin, what does it mean for something to be an apple? What does apple mean? What does counter mean? What does truth mean? And I tell you, I don't know. Do I know what I'm talking about?
This is probably some of my least favorite. These are my least favorite moves coming from a lot of these guys, because for whatever reason they have neglected to, or it's missed them, that the God that they're referring to is metaphysics. They're not talking about the Christian God. They're just talking about metaphysics, and they believe if you don't accept that this God either is the grounding for all reality, right? And they'll try to say, well, you don't understand transcendental reasoning, or you don't understand it. Look, most people can understand the first assertion that they make, that all of this stuff is here, and the only reason it's here is because there's a creator that made it, right? That's just people. That's just appealing to the fact that we can we're human beings. We anthropomorphize all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But JRobin, in an attempt, I think, to try to make his assertions about this being, in his mind, unassailable, is essentially equating metaphysics to God, right? He talks about it being the grounding for reality and the grounding for transcendental reality, and then he describes it as if it damn near sounds like it is metaphysical reality. It is everything that it's the single, the quantum theory of everything.
Yeah, and I said before, if you don't accept that, it is now on you to explain how everything is and why it is. And if you can't, well, look how stupid you are.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just there's more of this coming up because Clubhouse debates, who's in the live chat, and he's posted a couple of videos where JRobin's having some discussions with some people, and the one he posted one yesterday, which I think I was in for a little bit. I was listening in while I was at work. But there was one from a couple of days ago. He's talking to a kid. I don't know who this person is, and I think it may have been. I think it was a Clubhouse discussion as well. He all of this stuff is starting to blur together. Sometimes I think Clubhouse debates is pulling stuff off Discord, but that's usually Tom Rabbit. But that discussion between the two of them, it gets really obvious when I do a review on. I want to listen to it again. It seems to me that that's precisely what JRobin is doing. More and more that I hear him, especially this kid, kind of just lets him go. And as he's defined, as JRobin is explaining what he means by this and how this God should be defined and how you should think about it, it just sounds like what they're saying. Well, you have to be able to acknowledge that, like, if I say something like there's an apple on the table, we have to know for certain, right, to some degree of certainty, that that's actually an apple, that there's actually a table, that it's actually there in that space and time. Otherwise, like, if I don't ultimately understand the why behind appleness, tableness, time and space, then ultimately I'm not talking about anything meaningful at all. Yeah. That is a weird claim. So the idea is, like, I have to understand the underpinnings of the universe in order to make mundane claims like the sun's shining this morning.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing. And you call it a weird claim. I'll call it stupid.
There you go.
But it's like, because I can't, and I don't know that we can know, like, those ultimate things. I'm not sure we can know those things. And that's okay. I'm cool with that. I will sleep tonight not being able to know that. I'm all right. But somehow they say they do know. And and again, I'll go back to what I said before, and it sounds like a broken record at this point. But if you don't accept what they say, well, yeah, then you can't know. Then you can't know anything. But as soon as you, like, so if I go into a thing, tomorrow, let's say I go into Ask a Christian, right? And I fall to my knees and I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior, then I can fucking claim anything. And I can claim to know it. Just, what, because reasons.
Yeah, to their satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
And the weird thing is that with these guys, if you get it wrong, right? If you're willing to take on, because you've brought this up, and a couple other people have brought this up, where, okay, let's just say that JRobin says, all right, well, tell me what's wrong with this concept of a God. It's ultimate and it's a mind. Okay, go. Tell me why that's impossible. And you're like, oh no, it's not impossible. Okay, so you believe in God now? I'm like, I guess I do. I guess I always did. Okay. So now I can say that there's an apple on the table, and JRobin has to accept that I know what I'm talking about until he gets into the rest of the properties that he's talking about. And then he's going to exclude whatever it is, because I'm going to conclude, well, it's ultimate, it's a mind, but it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's a transcendent being. It doesn't exist in the same, like, it no longer needs to exist. This is what's left over of its mind. And then he'll just flip out because he has a lack of imagination, or he needs to cling to something dogmatic that he's heard from apologists, and so it just loses his mind. Like, I thought you said you believed in God. I do believe in God. I didn't say he actually exists now, right? Like, you could play with him and just toy with him in that forever, and then all he's going to do is he's going to have to retreat from ultimate plus mind and get into, no, it has to be real, and it didn't just make the universe, it's sustaining the universe with its power, which has a shitload of entailments on what that means about evil and suffering in the world. Because it's one thing for God to set a world in motion that's flawed and people get hurt and there's all this suffering and stuff. It's another thing to say that God not only set reality in motion, but is actively sustaining it, so everything that happens by that entailment is happening because his energy is making that possible.
Yeah,
so
because there's a world of difference between the deistic creator, like I said, well, we've been talking about, we've now been reviewing a 3-hour conversation for 5 hours, but hey, whatever. Like, very early on, like, there's a big difference between the deistic creator that created everything and then fucked off, versus the one who's playing it, you know, who has his hands dipped in it every second of every day,
Yeah.
you know, before, you know, like before, during, and after, right? And there's a mountain of difference between those two. That's actually super interesting. Like, it'd be really funny to say, oh yeah, you know, I think actually there may have been a God, but you know, I think enough time has passed, and maybe this God just fizzled. You know, he created us, and he created everything, but that used up all his energy, and now he's just gone.
You could do what Slavoj Žižek has kind of argued, something like this. He did it in a what is it, The Pervert's Guide to Film, I think, was the documentary that he hosted. It was done by, was one of the Coppolas made it, and he gets into The Last Temptation of Christ, and he starts off, he's like,
Mm.
I'm not a huge fan of Scorsese, but this movie's pretty interesting. Somebody wanted me to review it, and because they asked him to do Taxi Driver too, and he's like, I don't like Taxi Driver, which he's got some interesting reasons for that. But when he got into The Last Temptation of Christ, he gets into this thing that he's argued before, where he basically says, you know, for him, this idea of Christianity basically is like Christianity is atheism, in the way that he sees it, because this God essentially it has this existence, it has this tradition, it turns into a man, right? And then this man dies. I think this is kind of how his explanation goes. But in dying, he basically says that it is finished, and all this kind of stuff. So basically, all bets, everything is, it's over. There's no more God anymore. This thing has ceased to be. Sin and everything is taken care of. So now it's just it's done. And it's an interesting way of looking at it, because somebody could just do that. Someone could say, yeah, that ultimate mind thing, yeah, it existed, and it created everything. Or you could say, yeah, I believe that Jesus was God. But that was when Jesus died on the cross, he really died. Like, well, how do you know, that was God's death too, you know, or something like that. Like, God is evolving. It's not so. And then this challenges notions that they have about ultimacy. If it's ultimate, then it's perfect. It never changes. It's immutable. But so yeah, I mean, there's just so many different ways you can go to twist it up. But I think anybody starting with the ultimate plus mind thing can just concede, like, oh, oh yeah, no, I guess if that's what you're defining it as, JRobin, then yeah, I guess I've always believed in a God. So now you can't contend with me that I don't know what I'm talking about when I say there's a dog in the backyard or there's an apple on the table.
That would make their fucking eyeballs fall out of their head if you ever did that.
Yeah, they'd get pissed, because then they'd be like, well, is your God personal? Is your God revelatory? Did he reveal that there's a like, no, that's not how we started. Now,
yeah. No, we started with ultimate mind.
We started with your, were you giving me a worldview body double, JRobin? So
it's super interesting. Now, see, now somebody either you, me, or somebody watching this, or who will watch it later, has to do that. The only thing I ask is that whoever does that, please let me know it exists. Please let me know that video exists or audio exists somewhere, so I can enjoy it.
Well, no, but I mean, Apple and Counter. Okay, hang on. Whoa. Apple and Counter are just arbitrary things that names we've given to objects.
Look, I'm just adding.
Yes.
I'm just giving it's an analogy. Okay. Look, I'm adding clarity to the issue. Okay.
Okay, cool. Please.
Now, with respect to Apple and Counter, sure. But things like truth, if you don't know what it means for something to be true, right? And you can't distinguish between real truth.
Yeah, this is, oh God, he's already getting into that. I want to answer this question real quick. That would be impossible, though. How would something limitless run out of power? Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of spitballing and thinking out loud. I think one could make the claim that if, okay, so there's all of reality, there's all of the universe, and there's a creator being that basically brought it into existence. It's some kind of consciousness, but it's not immutable. It changes over time. It has relations with different people. And by relations, I mean all kinds of relations. It has covenant relationship with the Israelites. It has covenant relationships with other things. Maybe there's even other sub-deities and all this kind of stuff. But by the time it gets to Jesus, right, there's this weird interplay between the pinnacle of its creation, which is man, and their inability to live up to God's righteousness or whatever. And God transforms himself into an avatar in order to die, to reconcile himself to his own creation. He doesn't run out of power. His power is simply transformed. So instead of,
well, yeah, like energy, right? Like, you know, the first law of thermodynamics, right?
Yeah.
Energy can't be destroyed, just changes state, right? So maybe that's the case. Yeah.
So it imbues us with the ability to be kind of righteous people upon our death. So then, you know, we ascend to a higher plane. So it's not so much that God peters out. He evolves.
Oh, that would kill them.
Yeah.
God evolves.
Because they would then say,
Kilmer.
well, no, God is defined as immutable. Like, theologically, yes, God is defined as immutable.
Right.
But the problem with that is that claims of immutability in the scriptures can be contradicted by other scriptures that talk about God changing its mind, God making new covenants, God becoming a human in order to live with men, to experience our lives and to die for our sins. Those are all elements of how God changes. There's theological ways of trying to say, no, that was all part of the plan. God knew this was going to happen. He didn't change his mind. He didn't do it. Like, yeah, okay, fine. But we've already anthropomorphized so much into this being, the idea that God simply doesn't change is just a blanket assertion on it. If you read the scriptures, you can see that he does.
Malachi 3:6 would disagree with you. I, the Lord, do not change.
Sure, because and the prophets say that, right? So
yeah,
and when you think about that in the sense of a covenant relationship, well, the prophets are always showing up and say, "Hey, God hasn't changed. You changed. You failed to live up to your law." But then Jesus comes around, right? In Christianity, he
right.
comes around. So when Christians are making a claim that this being is immutable, all of a sudden now it's no longer about, I'm making a deal with special people, and when you live up to my agreement, I will bless you. When you fail to live up to the terms of our agreement, I will remove my protecting hand from me, and then calamities will occur. With Christians, it's like, nope, I'm going to get rid of that entire system. The new system is, I'm going to die for your sins. I'm going to redeem everyone. And not just chosen people, but all people. Everybody's my chosen person, and then move on from there. Like, that's a massive shift in his legalistic thinking, because before it was, I'm going to make a covenant with these people and get them out of Egypt. Now these people are being naughty. I'm going to kill them all. I'm going to abandon them here, and I'm going to create a group. I'm going to make a deal with another group. And Moses talks them out of it. So this God in the Old Testament is always about making covenant deals, and they're always based on, I am faithful. I will uphold my side of the bargain. And when you don't, you will reap the consequences for it. That's consistent throughout all of the Old Testament. You get into Christianity, that all changes.
Yeah, and it's funny because you taught there's the, what is it, the story, I'm forgetting the where it is exactly in the Bible now, but we're basically where, God's like, I'm going to destroy these people, and it's like, well, what if we could find, it kind of whittles it down. We find 100 good people, 50 good people, 10 good people, right?
Yeah, the Sodom and Gomorrah story. Yeah,
yeah, God fucking changes his mind all the time.
Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, you know what, if I can find even, just 10 righteous people, I won't. And then what does he do? He has some special forces, angels, smuggle them out.
Yeah.
Smuggle the family out so he can nuke Sodom and Gomorrah from orbit. So.
Yeah, and because his wife dared to look back, fucking pillar assault.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for what?
Bitch, I told you not to look back.
That is always my favorite thing, because you'd think that, like, it's a human thing to miss your home. You grew up there. Yeah. Theologians and apologists will always explain that, well, no, she looked back with longing. She wanted the filth and the nastiness there. And it's like, that's not actually mentioned there. Longing for the place that you lived isn't necessarily, like, you could live in a terrible town and still miss it when you've gone. You can acknowledge all the reasons that you had to go, like, yeah, the crime rate was high, or there was no amenities, or it was just a bad place to raise kids, or God was about to nuke it from orbit. But you're still going to miss your home. But no, she's got to turn into a pillar of salt for reasons.
Yeah.
Truth and things that are not true, propositions that are not true, that don't have that truth value of true, then you don't have a basis for making truth claims, do you? In the same way that you wouldn't have a basis for making statements about apples if you didn't know what apples were.
Sure. So,
but that's different than truth, right? Because he's smuggling in this notion, it built into metaphysics. Like, we can say it's true that it's true that today is Saturday, right? But how do you really know that if you don't really know what a day is, or you don't really know what the orb, are we orbiting a sun? Is there actually an Earth that would, like? There's all this bullshit built into that. It's like, look, it's true to the sense that it conforms to the state of affairs that we can recognize and that we can rationally and empirically demonstrate to be the case. That's what it means to be true, right? Whether it's a correspondence theory or however other different theories are on there. JRobin doesn't even really get into the nitty-gritty of different, like, truth theories. He just is like, well, because we don't know, you don't know as an atheist whether or not it's absolutely true. You can't know it to be true at all. That does not add up.
Yeah, I think we actually do get into that.
Okay.
In a minute. Yeah.
If I don't know what, okay, I think there's fair. Okay. And again, in the interest of being charitable and moving it forward, I agree with you. If I don't know what truth is, then I can't make statements about something being true or false. I think that's a true statement.
So then, if you say that you don't know, if somebody asks you, what your metaphysical outlook is, and you say you don't know, then you completely and utterly annihilate your ability to meaningfully predicate about the world. Do you realize that?
No,
So, that's what I'm saying.
I completely disagree with you. So, for example,
wow. Okay.
I disagree.
Okay, you're going to get into that. Let's pause this for a question. Richard asks both of us, how can the Christ Jesus fully agree with the Old Testament and Christians be correct in their reading of him and the Old Testament? That's an interesting question. I think by that you mean, because it depends. I think it depends on the gospel account that you're referring to. But generally, especially with Matthew, where Christ says, "I haven't come to abolish the law; I've come to fulfill it. Not one jot or tittle shall be changed."
Matthew 10:34.
Yeah, and with that, I don't know how they do it. I mean, generally, you end up having to get into things where you get into sort of the theological positions that, well, yeah, he meant that the law is not going to change, but he's there to fulfill it. So nothing's really gone away. It's just that Jesus is now the law, or this salvation that he's provided is the law, right? And some theologians take it even further and say, well, that's why your belief, your assent, you have to consent to this. You have to, you have to concede that that's actually the reality and admit that you need to repent. Otherwise, the salvation doesn't take effect. That's the new law.
Yeah, and it's weird. And it's weird how these kind of how apologists will kind of try to weave around this, right? To try to get around the messiness of Levitical law, for example. They'll try to say, well, Jesus changed everything, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and spirit, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? So everything from the old law has been fulfilled. And I've met with a little bit of opposition when I've brought up the kind of sticky little point of, where are the 10 commandments? Pretty sure they're in Exodus, which is the Old Testament. No, those two, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and spirit, and your neighbors yourself. Asterisk, please add 10 commandments, right? Don't worry about boiling a goat in its mother's milk. Don't worry about wearing mixed fabrics. Don't worry about shellfish. Don't worry about those things. Those are stupid and silly, right? But yeah, totally these ones. Right. It's this, it's what Christopher Hitchens called, cafeteria Christianity, right? Where you walk in, you take the things you like, and you leave aside the things you don't like.
Right.
I think it's silly. And hello to Richard. Richard and I have been corresponding back and forth with each other. We're trying to put together a time we can get together and talk. So hey, how are you? I sent you a response, I think yesterday, to your email. So hopefully we can connect soon.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's go.
Agree with you, and I'd like to tell you how I do. And I mean, so I've had, like I said, I've had these conversations a lot. So people say, it's like, do you know who Cy ten Bruggencate is?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cy was on the podcast a couple of years ago now, and he's a presuppositional apologist, as I'm sure you're aware. And he famously in the past, he's kind of disappeared. He's dropped off the face of the earth. But he has famously said, you can find this in YouTube videos. He has said, like, if you don't start with the God of the Bible, then you can't make sense of anything. I don't know if
I'm not Cy ten Bruggencate.
No,
You're not Cy ten Bruggencate. I want you to address the issue that I brought forward.
I'm trying to. But I'm a blabbermouth, so you have to let me blab a little bit. So the reason I said, I said this to him. He came into our house to do the podcast, and I said I disagree with you, and I'd like to explain why. Just because I don't start with your God doesn't mean I can't make sense of things. And what you said a second ago, just because it's like, if you don't know what truth is, so that provokes another question, like what's your it's like, what's your or what theory of truth do you subscribe to? Like myself, I use a correspondence.
God. Truth has its origin in God.
That assumes the God exists, no?
Yeah, in the same way that your definition of truth assumes that things exist. Okay, that's not. Listen, I don't think I don't know if you just like the.
Okay, so now he's going to get
How
back
dare
into
I
this.
assume things exist?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that that JRobin has no problem staying haughty when he's like, the fact that you're just assuming that things exist, which as an atheist you should be skeptical about, because I've decided that since you're skeptical of my God, you should be skeptical of literally everything. You should be hyper skeptical. That's a fair pigeonhole to place you in. And then on top of this, like he fails to understand this idea that the reason that he's reached, I don't think these guys have figured this out. The way our brains work, the central part that they're trying to do with this, the central thing that they're trying to present, is that God is as a necessary a presupposition as something like something either exists or it doesn't. It is what it is. It can't be what it's not, and it either exists or it doesn't. Right? It is what it is. It can't be what it's not, and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And God is just as self-evident as that. The only problem with this is that the God that he's talking about in all cases, every time he's talking about this, consider what he's laid out so far. So he wants to know how you can go about justifying the absence of a God given stuff you see, stuff you think you know, stuff you feel, all this other kind of stuff, right? He doesn't have a problem with this. He's just assuming, like, so he's starting with that stuff too. He's giving up part of this in the beginning. It's the central weakness of what he's trying to do. He has inferred God from the things he thinks are dependent upon God. And after having done that, he's just reaching the conclusion, oh, these things were always dependent on him, so I can start with God. But he didn't. You can talk about that until you're blue in the face. But you can't get past the fact that that's not the way the brain works. You started off with subjective experience. You started off with sense experiences. You worked your way through. You start to unpack reality around you as you grow and as you get older. You reach certain things where your consciousness starts being able to wrestle with complicated notions like epistemological limitations, epistemic limit, right? Where there's certain things you can't know to the extent you think that that you could. You can't absolutely know certain things for certain. There's a certain amount of a lack of certainty to different claims that we make, right? If you start wrestling with that kind of stuff, fine. But you started off with the stuff around you and questions about how it came to be, and in order to get around that lack of certainty, inferred from this collection of stuff, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter if JRobin believes any of this stuff is physically real, or if it's only mentally real and we all exist within God's daydream, or within the parameters of his mind. No matter what happens, he just believes all of this stuff. There's this stuff, and I can infer God's existence from it. Yeah. And then he's approaching everyone else like, unless you assume God, you can reach no conclusions about the rest of the world. So it's the worst double standard. I asked myself this question: why is there something rather than nothing? God. So because of all this stuff, it raised the question of why all this stuff is here, including me, rather than nothing at all, an absence of everything. Well, all this stuff is here, so it must have been put here, it must have been designed, or it must have been built, or something must have made. I start anthropomorphizing automatically and then reach that conclusion. It was a God. Then turn around and present the idea to other people. You might have had the same question too. You don't have to worry about that. The answer is God.
Exactly.
And if you don't understand that you need to infer reality from God, then you're starting off wrong. Like, I want to know from JRobin, how did he start from that when that's impossible?
But not to him. It's not impossible to him.
But he admits that that's how things work. Things were revealed to him, and because things are revealed to him, he can infer the revealer of the things.
But his ways are higher than ours. It sounds like a toss-off, but it's true. His ways are higher than ours. We can't, one day, Jefferson, one day we'll know. For right now, it's okay that we don't understand. One day we will. Now, when we're both standing before God, that's where we're going to run into real trouble, right? Because then it's going to be, it's like that. Some of you may be old enough to remember the show Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. Little cartoon that used to be on. It was quite literally was that, basically mom home with kids, and kids are fucking up, and it's like wait till your father gets home, and dad comes home and gives everybody shit. So and that's a very, very poor synopsis of the TV show, but basically that's the way it is, right? So one day we're gonna know, we're gonna be standing before God, and he's gonna be like, I told you. And JRobin and I will be standing side by side, and Jay's gonna be like, I tried to tell you, man, and then the doors open up and I fall down into the pit of fire. Oops, sorry. But it really is. We don't have to know. We don't have to understand. Look, this stuff is true. And it's, and we're going to go in the circle, right? But it's virtuously circular. We're going to go in the circle, and it's okay. I'm right. You're wrong. You don't see it. It's all right. But you better come around to my side. Otherwise, too bad, so sad for you.
Yeah. Yep. And here's one from Slim Jim. The Old Testament ceremonial law was intended to order the Hebrews to God through external symbolism, and now that this was fulfilled, a new one applies. Yeah. I think that in terms of kind of like standard Christian theology, I think that that's how that works. I think that where most, and Jim had made some kind of comment about that about the whole the law being fulfilled in Jesus kind of thing. The Protestants might take that a little further than somebody in either the Catholic tradition or the Eastern Orthodox position. So, but then you get into whole things. They have fights amongst themselves, especially now. There's Smokey and Praise and a few other people. They get into not only are they getting into arguments about old Earth creationism versus young Earth creationism, but they're getting into things like antinomianism or antinomianism, where it's to what extent do these people believe the law is over with or something like that. It's just. Yeah, it's dizzying.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember hearing it once. Some people will remember a guy named, and he's still around for the most part, David Smalley, right? He did a Dogma. He still does the Dogma Debate podcast, I think, but it's pretty much behind a paywall now on a different platform. But he talked about he talked about this a lot, and he said, if you put two Christians in a room together and start asking them questions, you'll eventually get to the point where you'll be able to find out that they don't even believe in the same God.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That, and this is something Christopher Hitchens mentioned in a debate. He said, it's like, because many Christians believe in a God of their very own. Right. But the one thing, and this is something somebody else said, I don't remember who it was. And it's very funny how the God you believe in loves all of the same things you love and hates all of the same things you hate. And that's super convenient.
Yeah, and that's why there's a God for every single believer. So.
Yeah, probably not me, but every single believer, yes.
Yeah, and in my case, if somebody were to ask me, well, what about this God or that God? I'm like, I might be inclined to believe in that one, but I told JRobin this once in a conversation I had with him. I said, well, what if that long video that I had, Tom Rabbit was on, and JRobin joined us. I was like, well, what if I think I did it on that video. To what extent would I be considered your brother if I conceded that I believe in Jesus and believe in this God, but this is how salvation works, and then laid out basically an argument for universalism. Jesus died for everybody and saves everybody. And good old JRobin just kind of went floppy on that, right? Like he doesn't, he admitted that he doesn't believe that, because that's obviously not Christian. That's not. I'm like, okay, so what difference does it make?
Yeah,
I've read the book. I've reached these conclusions. I believe this God exists, just like you. I believe that he came in the form of a man, as Jesus, just like you. But I believe his salvation scheme is something that applies to absolutely everybody, unfailingly, unlike you. Guess who doesn't get to go to your church? Me. So what's the point? One of the things that a lot of these guys miss is that beliefs can be incentivized.
Big time.
And beliefs like that. I mean, that's why you have so many, thousands of different denominations, because you will end up in a situation where you find, no, I don't agree with this particular rule. I don't agree with the emphasis they're doing here. I'm going to split off and form my other church. Are you still a Christian?
Yeah.
Nominally, yeah.
And this is so clearly evident, right, at what's happened, like especially in the US, right, the NIFBs, right, like regular Baptists weren't crazy enough. They had to break off and do new independent fundamentalist back. Like that wasn't even enough, right? Matt Dillahunty talks about this in one of his an opening statement during a debate once. He said, it's like, and if you don't like, basically paraphrased, if you don't like what's being said in the First Baptist Church of Memphis, you can go to the Second Baptist Church of Memphis.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Just walk across the street, and you'll be able to find that cafeteria variant or convenience store variant that you like the most. And if that's not good enough for you, you can start your own fucking church.
The weird thing,
your garage,
garage,
and fucking have at it.
And the weird thing is that in some cases it's not like, okay, well, I went to this church and it was like this, but there was this one thing that bothered me, so I changed and went to another church where they believed everything that I believed. And it's like, no, in a lot of cases it's simply, I went to this church and there was this one thing that they did that I really had trouble with, and I couldn't see that as being Christian. So I went to this other church that did all the same things, but this one issue just doesn't come up.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not like they went someplace and like, oh yeah, everybody's in agreement that this thing is wrong. Like I just wanted to go someplace where that wasn't front and center anymore, so I can ignore it. So there's all those variations too. There's this huge scale. Jim wanted me to point out and tell Michael that these differences are why the Reformation was a mistake.
Yeah.
Jim being a Catholic will embrace that position.
Jefferson, we are so, I don't know how much we covered today. We're so bad at this.
We are, yeah. No, granted, yeah. To everyone that's, I appreciate everybody that's still here live and actively providing thumbs up. I
guess part 4 soon.
Part 4 is going to be imminent. Yeah, let's. I can speed this up just a scotch and see if we can crawl through a little bit more of this, because we don't have much on this one. So let's see if we can make it.
Let's see if we can power through.
The ability to focus. You're asking me my perspective. You're not asking me my justification for things. Okay. Now I'm trying to actually present to you my reductio ad absurdum, very transcendental argument. But at every pass, I mean, I don't want you to, at the end, to say that I was afraid of defending my argument to you, or other people saying that was the case, because it's obvious.
I would never say that. I would I don't look for it. So
I don't want to give that impression. I actually decided to demonstrate to you the validity or the actuality of God to you. But it doesn't seem like I'm able to do that.
Hang on, you're going to actualize the reality of God to me?
No, I said establish that God exists through my transcendental argument.
Please take okay. Sure, fire away. But I want everybody to pay super close attention, because Robin is about to demonstrate God exists.
Yeah. So
please take as much time as you need.
So at the first part,
I like how even sped up just a little bit. You can hear just the kind of automatic, consistent disdain in JRobin's voice, like.
Yeah.
Like he's already so bored with this because he has to, I have to walk in. Like, that's not really an attitude that he should have, right? Like, the Holy Spirit should be filling him with the ability to really, like, this is about your soul, Michael. And JRobin seems kind of dismissive.
But it's his version of the Holy Spirit, right? Again. And so, but for everybody who's still here in the live chat, Robin is about to demonstrate the reality of God. So fucking buckle up, guys.
Okay, here we go.
Property of God I mentioned was that God is ultimate. So now, do you now accept that an ultimate is necessary? That a metaphysical ultimate reality is required?
I don't know.
No, the answer is either you do accept it or you don't accept it. So do you accept it?
Well, no. See, sometimes, and this is what's really interesting, is that no, hang on a second. This is what's really interesting, is that somehow I don't understand why some people look at and they seize upon I don't know as some kind of a weakness. When you don't know something,
Michael,
I don't know.
Spare me? I mean, no, I've endured these kind of lectures that you've gone on, and these little. But I think I've not
lectured you at all. I'm sharing my thoughts, and I told you I'm a blabbermouth.
Yeah, so I get it, Michael. Michael, you don't think I've heard you speak before? I know what you're going to say before you even say it.
Oh, okay? Please tell me what I'm going to say.
So Michael.
No, this is really cool. Tell me what I'm going to say.
Michael, please.
No, you just made a claim. I'd like you to demonstrate your claim. Tell me what I was going to say.
You essentially go on this rant about you being able to be neutral, and that neutrality is really the most open and honest position to hold to.
That's not at all what I was going to say.
Okay.
Why is a statement of I don't know neutrality?
Yeah.
These guys have really tortured those two distinctions. Like, there's nothing wrong with somebody saying, I don't know, I don't have an answer. Because in their little, efforts to beat up on anybody that's a skeptic, anyone that's not a Christian, like, oh, are you trying to say that you're neutral about it? Neutral? I'm just trying to say I don't know. I don't know if I'm neutral or not.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not neutral. I don't know.
I know, and it's so funny because if when somebody asks me honestly, and this is why, like, I put my own head on their chopping block. I'm like, you're holding the axe. Good. Right here goes my head. Which God are we talking about? Tell me about the Christian God, and then I'll tell you why that fucking God doesn't exist. And I'm not being neutral. I'm saying I don't know. It's like I claim neutrality about certain things, but I do not claim neutrality about the Christian God. Never have I done that. The Christian God doesn't exist. And he totally missed the point where he's like, you're going to claim neutrality. No, that's not what I was going to say at all. So I guess his prophetic nature failed him on this point.
Yeah, and the idea of being neutral on it is really kind of odd, because one of the things that like, if I'm neutral, I know what the positions are. I know which, if it's two sides or five sides, it doesn't matter. I know what the positions are, and I'm not committing to one or the other, because I feel like I don't have enough information yet to determine which one to commit to, one or the other. But in the case of I don't know is different. I don't know is, I mean, it's implied sometimes that I don't know is often used to justify a person's position of neutrality, because what they're saying is, I understand that this person's inclined to believe that there is a God. This person is disinclined to believe that there is a God. Given what I know from what they've been talking about and my own experience and studies, I don't feel that I have enough information to commit to one side or the other. So I'm claiming kind of neutrality, right? Due to the fact that I don't know enough. But not knowing the answer to a question does not automatically assume a position of neutrality. It can presume a position of total fucking ignorance. Like, I really don't know what you're talking about, which is why these guys almost always fail when they're dealing with atheists. Because atheists are like, no, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that I don't, I'm rejecting your claim. I'm saying I don't understand what your claim is.
Yeah.
You're asking me to reject or approve of something, and I'm saying I can't do that based on what you framed, because what you framed is nonsense.
Yep.
And they don't understand the atheist position well enough to understand this distinction between I don't know and I'm not committing to one position or the other. So
that is not at all what I was going to say.
All right, that was my mistake. Fine. Look, okay. I don't need to.
So here's what I was going to say.
All right.
No, you do need to hear it. Like, we're having a back and forth. If you're not interested, you're not interested, and we can stop. But
no, because every single time you respond, I have to allot 5 minutes to just listen to you say something that's not relevant at all.
I think it's interesting that he's saying, oh, I have to allot for this amount of time. You're on his channel, and he's complaining about the amount of time you want to take in your channel. I'm sorry, you're on your channel. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anybody want to guess how many times I would have been muted had he had the ability to mute me?
Oh yeah. And if you throw somebody like Tone in there, you basically wouldn't have been able to speak. You would have been able to start to make an interjection. But yeah, you're a guest on his Clubhouse, on your Clubhouse channel you are hosting, and he's complaining about the amount of time that, like, look, dude, if you don't have time for it, then just
fuck off.
Yeah, just say thanks for the invite, but I don't have time for this. I'm going to go. I'm not interested in the conversation any longer. There's nothing wrong with that. Sitting there and complaining like, oh, every time you open your mouth, I have to allow for a 5 or 6 minute lecture. And it's like, that to me just tells me right there, he's not listening to you.
Yeah, but it's evident, right? I said it a couple of times so far, just in the little bit we've listened to, the fucking maybe 7 minutes we've listened to today. But like I said it today, I'm a blabbermouth, and it's evident, right? We are 6 hours into reviewing a 3-hour conversation. I talk a lot. This is not, and if it was news at the start, it's no longer news.
Right.
I talk a lot.
And remember, he knew what you were going to say. He knows what your answers are going to be. So he knows that you talk a lot. And now he's complaining about it. Like, this is just more of him trying to just, poison the well. Like, oh, I can't get my ideas across because Michael just keeps over talking me. It's like, JRobin has spent quite a bit of time in this conversation talking. Like, I would say it's definitely, it's at least 50-50 here. So
it's probably fair.
Smugnerant, the mental state that manifests when a person suffers from the Dunning-Kruger effect. Smugnerant.
That's cool.
To what
I'm
I said,
I'm stealing
or
that.
it's
I'm
not a
stealing that word.
response to what I said. So, every single, I want to save, 5 minutes of my life and actually get to a productive conversation.
I think this has actually been fairly productive. So
yeah, but not
Robin, when I say I don't know,
whenever you're doing these lectures. No, it's not.
I'm not lecturing, dude. Honestly, I'm really not. I'm sorry if it comes across that way. Like I said, I'm a blabbermouth. That's a flag I fly proudly. But when I say I don't know, like there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. And you said to me, do you accept that there has to be a metaphysical ultimate? I don't know the answer to that question. And so I'm telling you the honest answer. I don't know.
You don't know if you accept something to be true?
It depends what we're talking about.
You don't know
whether I accept what to be true.
So you're exemplifying it again, that you're not focusing on the question, because the question was not, do you know if it is true that there's a metaphysical ultimate? What I asked you is, do you know if you accept it? Or I didn't ask you if you knew. I just asked you, do you accept it? If you're going to tell me that you don't know your own mental states, then we can just cut the conversation off now.
So perhaps I missed. So please re-ask your question. Please re-ask your question.
Right, but if you answer it, I'm like, okay, there might be something that is a metaphysical foundation for everything. That might be the case. But I don't know. He's just going to go right back and like, yeah, but don't you know your own mind? Yeah, I just explained it to you.
Yeah. But this is the necessity of one of the things that I will say, that I will make the claim is dishonest about how these guys communicate, is there are a ton of things that they require yes or no answers to. Because they can't keep going with their script, and yeah, it's a script. They can't continue on with their script with certain answers, right? It's like a fucking choose your own adventure book, right? If you choose hallway A, turn to page 37, page B, 78. And when I do something outside of those two categories, when I give him something that doesn't allow him to either flip to portion A or portion B, he has no fucking idea what to do.
Yeah.
Needs yes or no.
Yep. Otherwise, the script does not. It won't go on.
Yeah.
Question.
Please listen to the questions and the point.
Oh, what happened there?
I don't know.
Did you break it?
That's odd. It's like it's.
Ladies and gentlemen, JRobin broke the internet.
Yeah, I think he did. Oh, I wonder if this is.
Oh, this must be the end of that portion.
I wonder if it is. I wonder if it didn't complete it. Let me take a look and see. So I think that was.
Or what theory of truth do you subscribe to? And I want everybody to pay super close attention.
So Michael.
No, this is really cool. Tell me what I'm going to say.
Michael, please.
No,
okay.
You just made a claim. I'd like
to respond.
I'm enjoying the be a metaphysical ultimate. I don't know the answer to that question. And so I'm telling you the honest answer. I don't know.
You don't know if you accept something to be true?
It depends what we're talking about. Whether I accept what to be true.
So you're exemplifying it again, that you're not focusing on the question, because the question was not, do you know if it is true that there's a metaphysical ultimate? What I asked you is, do you know if you accept it? Or I didn't ask you if you knew. I just asked you, do you accept it? If you're going to tell me that you don't know your own mental states, then we can just cut the conversation off now.
So perhaps I misread you. So please re-ask your question. Please re-ask your question.
Please listen to the questions and the point.
Yeah, obviously that's the end of it.
Yeah, it cuts off. Yeah, I wonder if because I
well, you said that there were two. You said there were two parts, right? So
there were, and I don't know if that. My brother had told me that he thought there was going to be an overlap. There's probably going to be a gap. Let's take a look and see.
Do you accept something to be true?
It depends what we're talking about.
You don't know
whether I accept what to be true.
So you're exemplifying it again, that you're not focusing on the question, because the question was not, do you know if it is true that there's a metaphysical?
So congratulations, folks. A little bit of a reprieve. We made it through part 1 of this conversation. So great success.
Great success. Yeah. Well, I love the comment that came through a second ago. I didn't see who made it, but this is why we can't have nice things. I love that line.
Yeah,
I love that line.
Apologies to anybody, but yeah, we my brother had warned me about something like that. I think he thought it was, or maybe I misunderstood him. I thought there was going to be an overlap where some of this was going to be repeated in that, but no, it turns out it's actually like this one kind of goes back. He probably had some issues like encoding this. So yeah, we are on part 2 now. Do you need to stop soon, or do you want to push forward for another few minutes?
Let's go for about another 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Physical ultimate. What I asked you is, do you know if you accept it? Or I didn't ask you if you knew. I just asked you, do you accept it? If you're going to tell me that you don't know your own mental states, then we can just cut the conversation off now.
So perhaps I misread you. So please re-ask your question. Please re-ask your question.
Please listen to the questions and the points.
I'm listening.
You've
totally
time
listening.
and time again demonstrated you're not focusing. Okay. Do you accept what I said about the fact that a metaphysical reality is required for there to be intelligibility, and meaning?
What do you mean by metaphysical ultimate?
That there is a actual nature, that there's a reality that will explain the nature of truth, the nature of facts, and what they derive from.
Right. The problem with this, though, is that what he's actually inserting into there is that reality already describes that. Right. The problem that he seems to have is that that's not 100% certain, because he's the one with doubts. Skepticism, like, for him, God is a salve that he applies to his skepticism, and he no longer has to worry himself with skepticism, because he can just assert, that no, God makes this the case. So now he wants to basically put that onto anyone that he's talking to, in this case you, and say, well, here's the problem. There has to be. Do you accept the fact that a metaphysical foundation is necessary in order for there to be truth? Well, a metaphysical foundation would have to be like this is the weird thing about it. Like, one, how did JRobin establish that a metaphysical foundation is actually required in reality? And two, is that something that we would be able to prove in any kind of real way without just kind of blindly asserting it? And three, if that's required for truth, then the metaphysical foundation is automatically being asserted anytime we operate within the confines of this reality. If we assert facts, even if we tell lies, all that stuff is made possible by whatever undergirds and makes possible the totality of our reality.
And so it's funny, because that is one of my starting points, right? Is reality's real. The reason I didn't say that with Robin this time is because of something or things that have been said to me before. Well, if you deny reality, I'm not sure how you get out of bed in the morning, but whatever. But I've had it said, well, is reality a set? Is reality one thing? I actually had Double D once in a conversation said to me, "What's reality?" And I was flummoxed by that question, because I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? What's reality? In my head, I'm like, what do you mean? What's reality? Everything that exists. And he's like, well, is reality one thing, or is reality a set? And the problem is that, so had I said that to Robin, it would have started another snowball, another avalanche of questions. I actually already did know where those questions were going to go. That's why I didn't say that. So maybe I'm a prophet.
So Jody, how do you run an experiment to prove or disprove there's a metaphysical reality? Well, in that case, I think most apologists and theologians are going to say, well, that's the issue with the metaphysical reality, is that you can't demonstrate it empirically, so you can't run some kind of experiment, but you can demonstrate it rationally. So again, it gets into this hyper-rationalist Christianity kind of thing, where if I make an argument, by virtue of the fact that I made an argument, if it's valid and sound, then it comports with what is actually the case in the world, which I don't think any philosopher believes that is true. You can have an argument that within the confines of that argument, you've got this little world and you've got a valid inference rule, it's being maintained, and you can even determine that the premises and the conclusion are true, right? If they're sound, that means they represent something about the actual state of affairs. Otherwise, you just have a valid argument that doesn't really have anything to do with, it might, if you're dealing with a lot of hypotheticals, it might be sound, it might comport with actual reality, but it doesn't have to, right? That's the real distinction between sound and valid. These guys seem to think that what you can do is, I can construct these little arguments, or I can appeal to this hyper-rationalist desire, that what you can do is it becomes impossible to make a rational conclusion to the contrary, that God exists.
Right.
You must start with God. And it's like, no,
Well, if you start with your conclusion, everything makes sense. But it goes back to what I said before, and this is something I've seen so many times. Somehow, these apologists seem to think that a valid argument is somehow evidence for their conclusion.
Mhm.
Like it's completely not. They're talking out of their ass when they say this. But you said it before. That's what, leave it, the soundness. They assume the soundness. They presuppose the soundness of it. And now because they've presupposed the soundness, when they now construct a valid argument, well, this is evidence. What more do you need, dumbass?
Yeah, and it's more of that whole thing. Getting back to that little tangent that I had earlier, where it's like I really think that what they're engaging in is just post hoc rationalization. They're inferring a God from the stuff around them, like most people do. They're trying to say it's not post hoc rationalization. That gets and all they're doing is saying, no, you have to start with God. Like, but you didn't. You can't.
Yeah.
You started with stuff. You started with your subjective experience. You started with your reality. You had to assume that you yourself were thinking and feeling and experiencing shit, and all of that was real, and then you inferred God from that. If you're skeptical about the actual physical reality of the world around you, maybe it's pure idealism, but you still infer God as being the person, the entity that is creating this mental reality that we all exist within.
Right.
So they can't really get out of that. The only way they can do that is just to flip it and then hold it as a double standard. Like, well, I assume that there's a God. That's how I could know things in the first place. Like, right, but why did you get there? Why would you assume that? You assumed it because you inferred it from the crap around you.
Because if you don't start there, you can't make sense of anything.
Nope. So yeah, it's this basic thing. It's like it's really impossible to get out of it. Like God presupposes logic. These guys, Seitan Bruggencate used to make the claim all the time. Well, logic presupposes God. No, that can't be. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Yes, I accept that exists.
Okay, good. Now I would hold that this would also be eternal, right? It's outside of time. It doesn't need to be time. I hold that to be a direct entailment of it being ultimate. Okay.
How'd you get there? Can you explain how you got there?
Yeah, because if it began to exist, then it's a contingency of either a brute form or a non-brute form. Okay.
Okay, so you think so? Whatever. So you think
what's a contingency of a brute form? A brute fact has no contingency. There's no explanation for it. It's just asserted.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's talking. Yeah, that's a weird thing to say. So he's making up philosophy as he goes. So that's good.
I think whatever the metaphysical ultimate is eternal.
Right. Because I would say it follows just by being ultimate. It did not derive from anything, and it is the source and basis of all things, right? So if it's a brute contingency that began to exist, right, then that means that there is a metaphysical reality outside of it, which would then render it not being ultimate, right? So then that's why I would hold.
And so this is a point of clarification. You think that whatever this thing is, you said it exists outside of time. Do you think it exists outside of space as well?
Yeah,
that's just a question. That's just a question.
It's not a spatial, right? Yeah, it's not spatially extended, no.
Okay. All right. Continue, please.
Okay. Now, God is also a mind, which enables God to be personal and revelatory. Okay.
You just jumped right to God there, man. You just jumped right there. How'd you get there?
Okay,
you just jumped right there.
Yeah, because can you please let me finish?
Sure, please.
When we start attributing now this ultimate being, if you start attributing a mind to this being, that's when it starts to become called, or starts to be called a God in this sense, right? Because it's an agent, or it's a conscious entity. Okay.
Okay, John. And pardon me, John. I saw my friend John Maddox there. Hey, John, how are you? That's why I called you John by accident. Robin, I apologize. But what you said was, so you asked me first if I accepted whether there was a metaphysical ultimate. I said yes. You asked me if I accepted whether or not this thing was outside of time, and then I asked you if it was outside of space, and we agreed upon that. Then you said, and because God, you immediately it's like boink, and now we're in the God pool. How did you get there?
Well, I'm in the middle of explaining it. It seems like you just, I mean, it seems like you like wait for these kind of things to happen so that you could just, launch onto your gotcha moments.
I was just surprised that you went to God.
It's not necessary. I explained to you why I started calling it God because, well, for one, I'm actually describing God and all of his attributes for one. But secondly, when we start attributing a mind to this thing, then by all general or all or most, the vast majority of definitions of God, we're going to now start calling it would be in the category of something that we'd call God because it has a consciousness. Okay, it has a mind. So this is not illegitimate to do. and this is perfectly consistent with what I've been doing in the past. Okay, so you don't need
because
do
it's
this.
consistent with what you're doing in the past. It's okay.
Right. I find it interesting that like he's this is so stupid. I mean, this is oh my God. Oh, he's so frustrating.
I can hear your head in your hands.
Yeah, it's just like the kind of laziness that this is. Like this seems so childish. This seems like the kind of thought processes that I would have entertained when I was around 11 or 12 years old. You know, where you're trying to do, and then for whatever reason at the age of 14 or 15, where you start thinking that you're right about everything, you just dig into that. You know, you can't possibly be wrong because you thought about this long and hard. But the idea that these kinds of traits, like, oh, they're out there, and so, oh, they're God. What?
Yeah.
What? Like, why couldn't that be something else? Like, this is like the answer, the question that gets asked to him. Like, okay, it's ultimate and it's a mind. So why is a deistic God off the table? Why isn't that on the menu still? Oh, reasons. Because it's got to be personal and it has to reveal things to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't know it to be a deistic God or not. Like,
yeah.
Oh boy. Okay, but you didn't
It's
start
funny.
there.
It's so funny. I can hear the frustration in your voice, and I think what we need to do is
Wrap it up.
we have to reconcile that it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and just start drinking. Maybe we should. It would have been a lot longer, but we should have made this a drinking game.
Oh God, it would have to be. You know what? I would agree to a drinking game.
That's coming a lot from someone who doesn't drink, by the way.
Yeah, and I have been abstaining completely. I would make it totally safe. What we do is when JRobin uses the words valid or sound correctly, we take a drink. That way, we only have to maybe take one drink.
Oh, good. I can just put a small dram in the glass.
Yeah, just a glass of wine, take a sip, and that's and then you're gonna have to store the rest of it because you.
Yeah, I got to kill my liquor cabinet, man. But it's unfortunately we have kind of come to that time where we need to maybe put a pin in it. We are so bad at this, but it's so hard because it's so much fun. I want to thank you for wanting to just take hours upon hours to do this. Hopefully the people in the chat are getting something from it other than wanting to punch their screens or punch themselves.
Yeah, I hope this hasn't contributed to any damage to laptops, monitors, or tablets and phones.
Yeah.
The people hurling it away from themselves. I can't
exactly.
Robin. Yeah,
I'm reminded of that. I'm reminded of that meme of the monkey pushing the laptop off the desk, right? It's like bang bang, poof, and it goes. Yeah, it's funny for everyone. Like I truly, and I say this towards the end, and next time we're getting to the end of this. But I say this later on. Like I enjoyed this conversation for some masochistic reason, and I would even do this again, for a stranger reason, right?
You're sick. Sorry, no, I'm not.
Sick, man, sick. But I think for now, maybe a little over a smidge over 2 hours or so, we'll put a pin in it because I love weekend time with my wife. And you're going out of town, right? You do your family thing on Saturdays, right?
I usually do. Yep. I usually have errands that I gotta get taken care of usually early afternoon, and then I head out of town. So
Right.
And actually I am going to be making a dinner tonight. I'm going to be doing a kind of Southwest slow roasted pork loin kind of thing. So yeah.
Like slow cooker kind of thing, or like a smoker. Do you have a smoker outside, or?
I don't. I'm going to be taking some of the ingredients over to my folks' place. That's I don't know if they've got a slow cooker. It would work great in that, but I'm probably just going to have to throw it in a roasting pot and just chuck it in their oven.
Well, if you're doing slow cooker thing, you better get a move on because the slow cooker needs time, brother.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
This is a small one, so it's only going to take about 4 or 5 hours. So it'll be ready for dinner. But yeah, no, that's
some of it up here. I'm dying.
Well, I guess we will wrap it up then. Well, so the good news is we've made it to part 2. The bad news is there will be a part 4. I don't think it's good news or bad news. Michael, hit me up if you want to do this the same time, same place. We can.
I'm not sure about next weekend. There was talk of us being out of town next weekend, but
Okay.
maybe one day this week, like even perhaps. Well, we'll see. We'll chat via Twitter, and we'll put it together.
Yeah. But yeah, if you do and we have to skip a weekend, we'll do that. Or if we're gonna catch it in a week or whatever, just let me know when you're kind of around for it. Usually during the week.
I know
after
you're
work-
like my daytime is much more flexible than yours.
Yeah. I'm not available until after 5 p.m. So.
Right.
Yep. But otherwise, yeah. So yeah, we'll see what we're gonna do with that. If you can't make it on Saturday, no big deal. I'll probably cover. I've got a few things, also JRobin related, that I need to cover. Hopefully, I'll hit during the week. But if not, no biggie. So, and also to anybody listening, I am in talks right now with Christopher Mowdy, who's been around in this kind of community for a long time. He goes back a ways. He and I are planning on setting up a discussion that's going to sort of settle on. The question that precept apologists like to bring up a lot, which is, how do you know that? We're going to be talking about psychology of belief, some current research on brain science, how neurobiologists and psychiatrists and psychologists, what we've come to understand about how the brain physically knows things. And it's going to be an interesting one. We're kind of milling it around. We're hoping to have like a bit larger panel discussion on it. So I'm going to be putting some feelers out for anybody who might be interested in that particular topic. I'll probably be asking J.L. Warren in on that, because I think he might have kind of a background in that. I would be interested. I know Jody Wheeler has a background in psychology. He might be interested in that. I don't know if he has time for these kinds of things, but if he's interested, Jody, reach out to me if you're still listening. But I'll probably do a community post about that, and then for people to kind of reach out. But it's in the early planning stages. Christopher has given me some recommendations for reading. I'm going to try to get to some of those so that I kind of have a better background understanding, because it's going to be about things, advancements in scientific understandings about human consciousness and belief formation. Is kind of like what this is all grounded in. So a little different from what I usually talk about, but I am interested in that topic. So
that's cool. I'm excited to watch that.
Yeah, hopefully that will be good. Hopefully we can get that off the ground in another maybe another week or two. So we'll kind of figure out when that's going to happen. So. But other than that, thank you everybody for showing up. I did make it to 1,000. Monetization and weaponization is on its way. I think I'm currently in review, whatever that means. I don't know how long it takes YouTube to turn that stuff around, but that's going on. Thank you for everybody for helping make that possible. Thanks for continuing to show up and watch. Thanks for your likes, dislikes, hate mail. I did pick up a troll. He's been trolling me on a couple of different videos, but he is watching the videos. So joke's on him.
Yeah.
Special thanks to Michael, as usual. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, no, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we will be able to do this, if not next weekend, the weekend after. So
for sure, man.
All right.
Take care,
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, and take care, everybody.